My brother slapped my daughter in front of everyone. A sharp, cracking sound that silenced the entire room. She's only 10. My name is Amelia. And I need you to answer this for me in the comments. Have you ever been the only one in a room full of your own family who saw an act of cruelty for what it was? Have you ever felt that cold, isolating rage build inside you when everyone else just laughed? It was my father's 70th birthday party. The whole family was there, packed into the living room of the house I grew up in. My daughter, Lily, was buzzing with excitement, her voice a little higher, a little louder than usual as she told my dad a story about her school play. She was using her hands, her whole body, just pure, unfiltered joy. I saw my brother, David, watching her from across the room. His jaw was tight. He's always been the family enforcer, the one who demanded respect and quiet from the younger generation. He caught my eye and gave a little headshake, a clear warning to get my daughter under control. I just smiled back, a silent refusal. Let her be happy. That's when Lily, mid-giggle, accidentally knocked over a glass of water. It wasn't a big deal, but to David, it was a declaration of war. He didn't hesitate. He strode across the room, grabbed her by the arm, and slapped her right across the cheek. The silence that followed was broken by my parents' laughter. Not a nervous chuckle, but a full-throated, hearty laugh. She was being too loud, Amelia, my mother said, wiping a tear from her eye. David just taught her a lesson. But what they didn't know, as they all looked down on my crying daughter, was that the lesson was just beginning. They thought I was just Amelia, the quiet sister, the soft-hearted mother. They had no idea that for the past 5 years, I've been the sole manager of the family trust that funds their businesses, their homes, their entire lives. They thought they were in control. They were about to find out how wrong they were. I carried Lily home, her small body trembling against mine. She didn't make a sound on the car ride back, a silence that was 1,000 times more deafening than her earlier giggles. Once in her room, she finally let the tears fall, deep, shuddering sobs into her pillow. The angry red handprint on her cheek stood out like a brand, a permanent stain on her innocence that I knew I would see in my nightmares for years to come. I sat on the edge of her bed, stroking her hair until her breathing evened out into the fragile peace of sleep. And in that quiet, dark room, I didn't feel weak or like a failure. I felt a cold, hard clarity settle over me. I hadn't failed because I was powerless. I had failed because I had willingly played by their rules for far too long. They had always called it family business, a catch-all term for their casual cruelty. My brother, David, was the sun around which our family revolved, his arrogance polished to a shine by my parents' endless praise. He could do no wrong, and I, the quiet, observant daughter, was the family's perpetual disappointment. My silence wasn't born from fear, as they smugly believed. It was born from strategy. It was the quiet of a predator waiting for the perfect moment to strike. After checking on Lily one last time, I walked into my home office, the one room in the house that was entirely mine. I poured a glass of whiskey, the amber liquid a stark contrast to the cold fury in my veins. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop, navigating to a heavily encrypted folder I hadn't accessed in years. It was labeled simply, Patriarch Contingency. This wasn't about a school. This was about the entire foundation of their lives. Inside the folder were scanned documents, legal agreements, and private correspondence. It held the last will and testament of my grandfather, a shrewd, quiet man who had seen the rot in his own son and grandson. Years ago, seeing how my father and David treated me, he had secretly restructured the entire family trust. He had made me his quiet granddaughter who managed his personal finances with meticulous care, the sole hidden trustee upon his death. The rest of the family believed my father managed everything. They were wrong. They had been living in my world, under my financial protection, for the last 5 years, and they had no idea. I had built this fortress not of brick and mortar, but of legal clauses and financial firewalls. Knowing this day would come, I knew they would eventually turn their casual disdain on my daughter, just as they had on me. And when they did, I would not be unarmed. I would be the arsenal. The next morning, my phone buzzed with notifications from the family group chat. My mother had sent a picture of the spilled water glass with the caption, "A little storm in a teacup." David replied, "Someone had to be the parent in the room." My father added a thumbs-up emoji. They were erasing the violence, painting it as discipline, and painting me as the oversensitive mother. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my email and began to type. I scheduled an emergency audit and family trust meeting for 10 a.m. the following day. The invitation was sent from a formal, legal-sounding email address associated with the trust's law firm. The location was a sterile boardroom in a downtown skyscraper. I listed my father, my mother, and David as mandatory attendees. The subject line was cold and impersonal. Urgent financial review. I hit send, took a sip of my coffee, and felt the first tremor of the earthquake I was about to unleash. Within minutes, my phone rang. It was my father. I let it go to voicemail. Then my mother. Then David. I ignored them all. Let them wonder. Let them panic. They were walking into a courtroom, and they didn't even know they were on trial. The law office was a temple of quiet, intimidating power, gleaming marble floors, hushed tones, and the faint smell of old paper and new money. I was there first, sitting at the head of a long, polished mahogany table. My lawyer, a stern-faced woman named Ms. Albright, beside me. When my family arrived, they were a flurry of entitled agitation. My father was blustering about the inconvenience. My mother was arranging her scarf, and David was scrolling through his phone with a bored expression. The very picture of a man who believed he was untouchable. "Amelia, what on earth is this about?" My father demanded, not even looking at me, but at Ms. Albright, assuming she was in charge. "We have businesses to run." I didn't answer. I simply nodded to Ms. Albright, who dimmed the lights. The large screen at the end of the room lit up. I watched their faces as the first document appeared. The original trust deed signed by my grandfather. Then, the amendment he signed a year before his death. The one that transferred sole and absolute power of trusteeship to me. David squinted, confused. My mother's smile faltered. My father leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "This is some kind of mistake," he said, his voice losing its confident boom. "It isn't," I said, my voice calm and even. It was the first time I had spoken. I clicked the remote. The next slide showed the complete financial portfolio of the trust. Its growth under my 5-year management was significant. Then came the distribution ledgers. I projected a detailed breakdown of every penny they had spent. My parents' mortgage on their sprawling home, a property owned entirely by the trust. The lease payments on David's luxury sports car. The wire transfers for his business ventures that never materialized. The receipts from my mother's shopping sprees in Europe. It was all there, in black and white, a monument to their avarice. You have all been living under the impression that this is your legacy, your money, I said, my voice cutting through the silence. As of last night, I am here to correct that profound misconception. David finally snapped. You've been spying on us. What is this? Some kind of pathetic power trip? He stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. You think you can control us? My mother tried a different tactic, her voice dripping with sickly sweet poison. Amelia, darling, this isn't you. Let's go home and discuss this as a family. Don't let these lawyers put ideas in your head. The only idea in my head, I said, looking directly at her, is the image of my 10-year-old daughter's face after your son slapped her, and the sound of your laughter that followed. That silenced them. For a moment, the truth of their cruelty hung in the air, undeniable. I pushed 3 thick folders across the table. This is not a discussion. This is a notification of terms. Ms. Albright spoke, her voice sharp and final. For David, a notice of immediate recall on all personal and business loans extended from the trust. As your assets are leveraged against trust holdings, they are hereby frozen. You will also find an invoice for 5 years of unearned salary from a no-show position at a trust-owned subsidiary. You have 30 days to remit payment. David turned pale, sinking back into his chair. For Richard and Eleanor, Ms. Albright continued, addressing my parents, a formal notice of property ownership transfer. The trust is reclaiming its asset. You have 90 days to vacate the premises. Furthermore, your monthly stipends and all associated credit lines have been terminated, effective immediately. My father stared at me, his face a mask of disbelief and rage. You can't do this. I am your father. You were my father, I replied, standing up. But you chose to be his enabler. You chose to laugh. Discipline, as you both so loudly proclaimed, is about teaching lessons. This is my lesson to you. True consequences. You don't get to break the spirit of this family and then live off its wealth. You don't get to celebrate cruelty and then ask me to pay for the champagne. I turned and walked toward the door, leaving Ms. Albright to handle the explosion I knew was coming. I didn't look back. The days that followed were a hurricane of desperation and rage. Voicemails filled with threats from David, tearful, manipulative texts from my mother, and stony, silent emails from my father's new, very expensive lawyer. They tried to rally the extended family, but the whispers died down the moment the rest of them realized their own smaller, yearly dividends now flowed directly from my desk. Financial loyalty, it turned out, was thicker than blood. The silence from the rest of the world was heavy, and some nights, the loneliness of my decision was a physical weight. But then I would look at Lily, sleeping peacefully, the faint shadow of the bruise finally gone, and I knew I would walk through this fire 1,000 times over to get to the other side. I had no interest in their crumbling empire. I sold my parents' house, a place filled with hollow memories, and liquidated David's frozen assets. The money wasn't a prize. It was a tool. With a significant portion of it, I started a new foundation, something built not from their rot, but from Lily's resilience. It wasn't about art or performance. It was about safety and justice. We called it the Lily Foundation, with a simple, powerful tagline, for voices that won't be silenced. Its sole purpose was to provide free legal counsel and trauma-informed therapy to children and parents navigating the dark, complex maze of familial abuse. Instead of demanding a public apology, I held a press conference to launch the foundation. Standing in front of a banner bearing my daughter's name, I told our story. I didn't use their names. I didn't need to. I spoke of the subtle ways discipline can curdle into abuse, of how laughter can be a weapon, and how financial power so often props up systems of domestic tyranny. I spoke as a mother who had decided to stop asking for respect and start commanding it. Lily stood beside me, holding my hand. When it was over, I knelt down and handed her a small, ornate key. "This is the key to the front door," I whispered. "You're in charge." A real smile, bright and unrestrained, lit up her face. Months later, on the Foundation's official opening day, I watched as Lily, my quiet, 10-year-old daughter, confidently gave a tour of the bright, welcoming space to another family. She was no longer a victim. She was a beacon. That afternoon, a single, thick envelope arrived at my office. It was a handwritten letter from my mother, filled not with apology, but with justifications, accusations, and a final, desperate plea for money. I read it once, feeling nothing but a distant, quiet pity. I didn't shred it. I simply placed it in a desk file labeled closed. My revenge was never about their destruction. It was about this. Turning back to the sound of my daughter's laughter, loud and clear and free, as she led another little girl toward a room full of light. Their silence was the price. Her voice was the reward. You know what no one prepares you for? The profound, deafening silence after the war is won. Once the lawyer's call stopped and the last angry, misspelled text from David faded from my screen, I was left in a quiet I hadn't known my whole life. There were no more obligatory Sunday calls, no more passive-aggressive group chat invitations for holidays I was expected to attend, but not enjoy. Even my aunt, my mother's sister, who had witnessed David's temper her whole life, sent a single, chilling message. Was it worth burning your entire family to the ground? Was it? Some nights, sitting alone after Lily was asleep, the weight of that question felt immense. I had severed a limb to save the body. I had chosen my daughter, but in doing so, I had orphaned myself. I cried in those early days, not from regret, but from the sheer, crushing loneliness of being the one who had to light the match. But Lily, my resilient, beautiful Lily, would not let me linger in the shadows. One Saturday, she found me staring out the window, lost in thought. She tugged on my hand. "Mom, there's a place I want to show you," she said with a seriousness that belied her age. We drove to a small, slightly weathered community building downtown, a place with a faded sign that read Haven House Women's Shelter. "My friend from school. Her mom had to come here," Lily whispered, her eyes wide with a deep, painful understanding. "She said they had to leave everything behind. Her dad had all the money, so they couldn't go anywhere else." She looked from the building to me, her gaze steady. "You have the money now, Mom. We can fix it." And just like that, the loneliness evaporated, replaced by purpose. We weren't just a foundation anymore. We were becoming a rescue mission. We met with the shelter's director. We established a new arm of the Lily Foundation, the Emancipation Fund. It wasn't just about therapy and legal aid. It was about providing real, tangible escape routes. We created grants to cover security deposits, first month's rent, and moving costs for women and children leaving financially abusive households. It was my money, not family money, not legacy money, just mine, and we were turning it into 1,000 different keys for 1,000 different cages. 2 months after we launched the fund, a letter arrived, thick cream-colored paper, no return address, just my name in my father's familiar, shaky cursive. I opened it with hands that did not tremble. I saw a story about your foundation on the local news. He wrote, "The woman you helped." She looked so relieved. I see now. David is lost in his anger, but I see what I refused to. I wish I had been a father you could have run to, not from. I don't expect forgiveness, not from you or Lily. I just hope you know I am sorry for all of it. I read it 3 times, and the only thing I felt was a quiet sense of detachment. His apology was a period at the end of a sentence I had finished writing long ago. I no longer needed it to feel whole. By then, Lily and I had already filled the hollow spaces they had carved out of us. We reclaimed our lives, and they were left with the ruins of theirs. David, his credit destroyed and his reputation in our city's business circles quietly but permanently tarnished, ended up taking a menial sales job to states away. My parents sold off my mother's jewelry and downsized to a small, rented condo. Their power, built on a foundation of money and intimidation, had crumbled to dust. The same week my father's letter arrived, Lily was featured on a popular podcast about youth activism. The host asked her what it felt like to have stood up to her family. Lily looked directly into the camera, her chin high. "I didn't stand up to them," she said, her voice clear and strong. "I just stopped letting them make me small. And I decided to help other people stand up, too." I wept listening to her quiet, cleansing tears of pure pride. The little girl they had tried to silence, to shame, to break, now had a voice that echoed in households across the country. We expanded the Emancipation Fund, helping dozens of families find freedom. I eventually stepped back, letting a board of directors run the day-to-day, while Lily became the foundation's youth ambassador and its heart. When a new mother, shaking and tearful, walks through our doors with her child, it is Lily who meets them, takes their hand, and says with unwavering certainty, "I know what it feels like. You're safe now." Because revenge isn't always the fire that burns your enemies to the ground. Sometimes, it's the water that puts out the fires they set in everyone else's lives. Sometimes it's watching them fade into obscurity from the window of the palace you built from the rubble they thought would bury you.